You're listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson of Protein Machining, and this week I'm joined by Ethan Patane. Welcome, Ethan.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, likewise. So for anybody who doesn't know who you are or where they can find you online, who are you? What do you do? Where can they find you? All that good stuff.
Yeah, so my name's Ethan. I am a 21-year-old college student. I like to introduce myself as the 21-year-old college student who was blocked by Titans of CNC and whose first word was excavator.
It's a good claim to fame.
I commented on one of Titans of CNC's posts a while ago saying that they set unrealistic goals for shops all across the world. I guess they didn't like that. But so my Instagram is e.patane515. That's really the only social media I have. I have a YouTube channel that I posted some stuff on, but mostly just crap. So yeah, that's kind of introduction to me, social media.
And then what do you do? Like what I mean, if you look at your Instagram page, you clearly make a lot of parts. I think you're both working at a place and going to school and working there as well, or what's the deal there?
Yeah, so I go to RIT and my major is robotics and manufacturing engineering technology. I was mechanical engineering for 3 semesters and just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do the theoretical math and couldn't just sit and crunch numbers all day long. I had to get my hands on stuff. So I'm in that new major now. And I'm also the former CNC lead on RIT's Formula SAE team. I did that for 2 years, and I'm now a manufacturing manager there, which we kind of created so that I could still have a lead position and kind of direct the team. I machine pretty much just lots of parts. I like to say that I make the parts, I don't ask the questions, which I think is a pretty common theme with a lot of people on Instagram.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I have to allude to with a lot of people. They go, "Oh, cool, you make stuff," and I'll show them pictures or something. They'll be like, "Oh, what's that?" And I was like, "I don't know."
Yeah,
it's a part.
Sometimes you can't even say what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So I'm going into my fourth full year. And one of the cool things about RIT is that since it's a 5-year program, you get to have 4 or 8 academic semesters like a normal college, but you also get to do 4 co-op semesters and work anywhere you want. Most people do either 2 or 4 companies. I'm probably going to do 2. So this past co-op, which is ending for 2 weeks in May, I worked at Moog in the aircraft group in East Aurora, New York. I should mention before the podcast, I went on their website and kind of double checked all the stuff I'm about to say to make sure that it's either public knowledge or easily available, because there's a lot of ITAR stuff and I don't want to get in trouble. But I've been working on parts for V-22, F-35, Sikorsky Black Hawk, I think a little bit of F-18 stuff, but some pretty serious military aircrafts. I've been doing EDM stuff, sinker and wire, as well as standard like 40 taper mill work.
Awesome. That's some really cool stuff. And you really learn. I don't know how the prints are that Moog has to deal with, but I know from my stint in aerospace stuff, you really learn what a good print looks like and what a bad print looks like and how to get around both of them.
Yeah. When I showed up on the first day at Moog and saw GD&T on prints, like I knew how to read prints and I knew GD&T, but out of the 1,500 parts or so that I've made at school, once have I seen a GD&T symbol.
That's rough. Well, let's get into your backstory. What led you to wanting to go down this career path? What was the pivotal point in changing your major? All of the good stuff.
Yeah. So how far back should I go?
As far back as you want.
All right. Well, kind of like everybody else on this podcast, I started off with Legos or Connects. The first ever project that I made with my hands was a rack for my autographed baseballs, because I was a pretty avid baseball player. I made that with my dad when I was 11, I think. And it actually was pretty nice. I still have it. And even in retrospect, it was a pretty good project, but probably because my architect father was constantly steering me in the right direction. And then for a while, that was kind of all I did, or I should say, that was the only project I made for a while. I picked up some other interesting hobbies. I solved Rubik's Cubes, 3x3 through 7x7. But once you can solve a 4x4, you can pretty much solve anything else. I yo-yoed semi-competitively, which is a weird one. Yep. Okay. And not just, I don't know if you've seen professional yo-yoers, but there's some pretty wild stuff now. It's not just a yo-yo that goes up and down. They'll spin for 10, 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was really big into yo-yos when I was a kid, and it wasn't quite that good yet. I mean, this was, the internet was like fairly brand new, and like there wasn't the giant communities there are. But yeah, you start seeing real yo-yo tricks, and you're like, oh, okay, this is an entirely different category of thing.
Yeah, it's unreal. People like Zach Gormley and Gentry Stein, it's just unbelievable. So yeah, I was a pretty standard kid through the end of sixth grade, which is when my parents found these two women who provide a service called the Camp Ladies. And basically, you give them a list of your interests and kind of what kind of person you are, and they do a bunch of research and find the best summer camp options for you. And that probably sounds like the most suburban white person thing you've ever heard. Uh, but
You're not
I,
wrong. It
yeah,
also
I,
sounds kind of culty, but you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. My mom won't like that I said that, but it's true. Yeah. So even though it is kind of suburban, I do trace almost 100% of my success these days back to these two ladies, and I have some really supportive friends and family, especially my roommate Kate. Shout out to Kate. But the camp ladies are kind of the furthest upstream divergence, if you will, that sent me down this path. So these two ladies represent or recommended two camps: Maine Teen Camp and Beam Camp. And Maine Teen Camp is a camp in Maine for teenagers, which is crazy. I went there for 4 weeks that summer, and it was just a good time. I got to meet some international people. And the second camp, Beam Camp, is a construction architecture camp in New Hampshire, and it runs for 8 weeks, split up into two sessions of 4 weeks. And in the winter and spring preceding each summer, they send out a query to designers and artists and engineers all over the world looking for a massive project for the camp to work on each session. And when I say massive, I mean like quite massive. The first summer I went there, I worked on this roughly 20 by 20 foot raft powered by a human-sized hamster wheel that you can get in and run, and it like would paddle the boat
What?
forward. Yeah, if you look it up online, there's some really cool projects. And then my second summer there, we built, I forget exactly how tall, but I think it was 30 or 40 foot tall water slide powered by repurposed bikes and exercise steppers. So we plumbed water through these bikes, and they pumped the water up to the top, and then the water would run down, and you take the stairs up to the top of the slide and go for a slide.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
That sounds
So
like an amazing camp.
yeah, it was a really good experience. Yeah. And so that they kind of recognized that I was more interested in it than the other campers. And so sometimes instead of going off and doing other activities, they'd let me stay behind and work with the counselors, which was nice. So I built my first solo project there, a custom box for all my Rubik's Cubes. And at the time, it was beautiful. I kind of thought, how can it possibly get any better than this? I'm at the top of my craft. And in retrospect, it was a piece of shit, and I can't believe that thing ever saw the light of day. But I think it's important to recognize where you start. I don't
Yeah.
think I used two of the same screws on that entire box. The entire thing was made of construction grade, probably pressure treated plywood. The hinge knuckles weren't collinear, so it binds when you open it. I still have it, and I used some disgusting toxic finish on it that I swear is still curing, because you open it up and you just get this whiff of cancer hitting you. I actually ended up writing my college essay on that box, but I can talk about that more. So I came home from this beam camp after the first summer and was totally hooked. And I hadn't really made the connection that that was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, because at 12 years old, you've barely gained self-consciousness. But I came home and immediately started abusing all my dad's tools. And he had some hand tools, circular saw, this crappy rigid chop saw that I'll never stop giving him crap for, and a Dremel. And let me tell you, when all you're allowed to use without adult supervision is a Dremel, everything around the house starts to look a lot more engravable.
Uh-huh. Yep.
So I just started engraving random stuff, random pieces of wood, digging through the garage, finding old lumber. And now the previous owner of our house was a model train builder. And before I got into woodworking and machining, my parents sold his South Bend lathe and small mill, which is a huge bummer.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. So then around the middle of that next school year, my dad bought me a router and a router table, which is kind of a roundabout way of providing a means to build a workbench with me. So we built this really nice workbench, and the thing is a brick shithouse. It's got 2-inch thick butcher block countertop backed with 2 sheets of 3/4 inch MDF with 4x4 legs and 2x4 aprons. So the thing's not going anywhere.
Jeez. Yeah,
Yeah.
talk about overbuilt.
Yeah. But it's, yeah. it's been the foundation for my manufacturing self-learning. And so I just started screwing boards together, making crappy boxes, digging through the garage, like I said. And it was about that time that my dad bought a Delta table saw off of his friend, and we hauled it down to the basement. I should mention this is a basement shop, and we just have this little bulkhead. So lugging down these 300, 400, 500-pound pieces of cast iron is not easy. And so, yeah, he bought this Delta table saw off his friend and used it for a while. I'm happy to share that I still have all 10 fingers.
That's very good.
Yeah. So then after I came back from beam camp the next summer, I was really into woodworking, and I was just starting to develop some skill, making better projects. Still a lot of boxes since they were easy. And I was always a speed racer when it came to woodworking and honestly just life in general. And my parents were constantly telling me to slow down, which I've hated, but now I see they were right. It's a miracle I can still count to 10 using just my fingers on my hands. And then throughout 7th and 8th grade, I always excelled in tech ed classes, especially using the machines, even though I know I pissed off both the tech ed teachers because many years later, my high school engineering teacher told me that he got an email from them when I graduated saying, "Watch out for Ethan because he's trouble." Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So I know Miss Lipinski is not listening to this, but I'm sure she'd be surprised to know that now I'm machining parts for race cars and military aircrafts. And then that following summer, I was on a trip up to Vermont, and my parents and I stopped at this bowl turning shop. And I just remember walking in and being hit with this incredible smell of every East Coast hardwood and like stuff from Africa as well, some really cool species. And I approached the lady at the front desk and asked if she had any offcuts that I could snag. And she said she did, but she would need to go grab it from their shop, and asked if I wanted to tag along. And so of course I did. And I remember I remember her opening the door to the shop, and the first thing I see is the most clapped out, sawdust riddled, backlash suffering, sad old Bridgeport. And I didn't know what it was at the time because I'd really only ever used a drill press for drilling holes. And what happened next, my dad will never let me live down. And now that I'm sharing it, my friends will probably never let me live it down. But I looked at this Bridgeport, and I looked at my dad. I looked at the Bridgeport. And I looked at my dad, and I said, "Whoa, Dad, look at that drill press." So,
I mean,
yeah.
if that's all you knew, that's not a bad leap.
Yep. Yeah. So that summer, I also visited Lee Nielsen, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's a high-end hand tool manufacturing company in Maine. They make hand planes and chisels.
I want to say I saw some YouTube profile on them at some point.
Yeah, Titans of CNC did a tour of their shop too.
I don't think I saw that one, but
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah.
saw something with actually them that they put on, maybe.
Yeah. So I got to walk around their shop, which was cool. They had a ton of Okamoto grinders. And I remember this guy talking about something called the Haas VF2 and the fact that it could change tools in 4 seconds, which was wild to me and made no sense because prior to that, all I knew was the fact that changing collets on a woodworking router took 5 minutes. So that kind of wraps up middle school and brings me to high school. I distinctly remember looking through the elective catalog before freshman year and seeing this class called CAD. And I had used SketchUp and Blender, but never really any professional software, so I thought I'd take it. And on the first day of freshman year, I walked into 5th period biology class and met the teacher, Mr. Birch, who would go on to become a great mentor of mine. I wasn't really interested in biology at first, so it was hard to focus. But as we got into class, he mentioned that he was a woodworker, and we became really good friends. He brought in a couple instruments he made. He made this beautiful violin. He's really talented. He had this class pet named Betty the hamster, and I made Betty a 2-story house with a room for her water bowl and hamster wheel. It was awesome. Had stairs going from the 1st to 2nd floor too. And
That's
then Betty
super cool.
Betty went missing a couple months into school, and for some reason everybody accused me of eating her. I still haven't gotten to the bottom of that. But yeah, so Mr. Birch and I would sit together before and after class and criticize the joinery on the cabinets in the school and just generally talk shop. He retired when I graduated and moved to Seattle, and now he's building a house derived from the material that he's finding on the plot of land that he bought. So he's like building all of his bathroom tiles out of the clay he's finding in the ground. It's pretty wild.
Wow, that's really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, he's talented. And then on the second day of freshman year, not the first, because we didn't have eighth period on letter A days, I met a man that I am now privileged to call a great friend named Mark Piotrowski. And he would turn out to be really my greatest supporter of all time. We started the first class talking about CAD in general and just some typical dimensioning practices and whatever. And some people were in that class just because they had to be in it or because they thought it sounded cool, but not because they really wanted to be there. So I kind of got the sense that even as a freshman, I was the most well-versed in CAD at that point. And so we were talking about these things called countersinks, and nobody really knew why we used countersinks. So when Mr. P, that's what we called him, asked, I raised my hand and said, well, some of these screws have these 82 or 90 degree tapers on the bottom of them. So we use the countersinks so they can sit flush. And he shouted bingo and came over to my seat and gave me a big high five. And he's like 6'10", so it was a very big high five. And so we would go on to forge a really strong relationship as he became more and more aware of my skills and trusted me more and more. And we had a pretty decent shop for high school, not like a Votech shop, but we had a couple chop saws, band saws, drill presses, this little Grizzly mill lathe combo machine, and this thing called a Da Vinci CNC router, which is some foreshadowing. And so throughout the next 2 years of high school, I just continued growing my skills with Mr. P, and he was always encouraging me to grow. When I would misstep, he'd be there to redirect me. He has this term he calls servant leadership, which is all about being a good leader, but also working with your people and helping them grow, which is, that's what you want to see in all leaders. But he was really the perfect embodiment of servant leadership. I really don't really have the words to describe the impact he's had on me. Truly a stand-up guy. And so during sophomore year, I joined my high school's first robotics team, 1712. For anyone who's not familiar, although most people probably are listening to this podcast, First Robotics is a competition involving north of 8,000 high school teams across the world. And every year they're given 6 weeks to design, build, program, and test a 120, 125 pound robot to do various tasks. And then they compete at a number of district or regional competitions with the end goal of making it to Worlds. And that team is where I met one of my best friends, Nathan, who I still keep in touch with frequently. We spend a lot of time together in my shop at home. We think so similarly. I remember this one time we were working on the robot. It was like 11:30 at night, the day we were supposed to finish building. And Nathan and I were working very closely together. And I asked him to grab me a wrench, and he ran to the other room and came back and put his hand in my pocket and dropped the wrench in my pocket. And we look over and we see the head mentor looking at us like, what the hell are you guys doing? Get your hand out of his pocket.
Man.
Yeah. So that following summer, my dad found a SawStop table saw on Craigslist. And we figured it'd be a good addition to the shop so I could continue keeping all my fingers. Are you familiar with SawStop?
Yeah, they're amazing. I've got a friend with one, and I'm always trying to prod him into letting me, run a hot dog into it or something so I can see it in person. But I've seen a million demonstrations, and it's really amazing. I wish it was more widespread. I know for sure that
it was cheaper.
Yeah, because I know that the table saw at my high school did not have one. We had many safety meetings and things like that. So the high school I went to had 0 vocational programs at all. So the only way you could make stuff was in the theater program as theater productions. And the theater teacher was amazing. Mr. Testa was the best. But I want to say when you started that class, you had 2 or 3 days solid of just safety trainings. And he would, demonstrate kickback and, all kinds of stuff just to be hey, this is you're in high school, but this is no joke. You're not, there is no coming back from cutting off your finger. So don't do this.
Yeah, there's a guy on YouTube. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but I think it's Colin Connect or Colin Necht. And he did a video on kickback where he intentionally kicked back a piece on the table saw and almost cut his hand off in the process of making a YouTube video. So it's serious stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my dad found that table saw, And I have triggered it twice, but neither time was on my hand. The first time was on a pencil, which turns out if you're touching the tip of the pencil and then you cut through the shaft of it, um,
Oh, interesting.
it
Okay.
still triggers. Yep.
Yeah.
And then the second time, I had tilted the blade on a 45-degree angle, and I made sure to clear my miter gauge. But then I raised the blade, but I forgot that when you raise the blade, it raises it not vertically, but on whatever plane the blade is on. So it actually moved a little further to the left. So then I hit my aluminum fixture on it, which is a
Oh
bummer.
no.
Yeah. So yeah, I like to say that that's the 70 or the $69.99 pencil. Yeah.
So I have a question for you before we move on, just because
Yeah.
it's something I've been interested in. Did you end up replacing the blades on both of those activations? Because I know I've seen videos where they're like, no, you can get them resharpened and they're fine. You know, it actually doesn't damage them that much. And then I've seen other people that are like, no, you just replace the blade.
Yeah, so it depends on a couple things. If your blade doesn't have a lot of teeth, then when the aluminum brake gets discharged, it tends to really, the blade tends to really dig in. And if you can even get it out, it usually has lost a couple teeth and then you got to scrap it. But if it's a blade with a lot of teeth, usually it's a thicker blade, so it doesn't get wedged in as much. So you can sometimes pull it out and salvage it. Sometimes it warps the blade and then it's trash. So I guess I'd say there's like a
It depends.
60%. Yeah, there's like a 60% chance you could you have to scrap the blade.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, still worth it. Like, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, but it was just always
Yeah.
something that I found kind of interesting. So how jumpy were you after those activations? Because I mean, it's no joke when it happens.
Yeah. So the first time I didn't actually know that it was a pencil. I was using a crosscut sled and I had put my pencil down on the other side. And I guess I had my hand just sort of on the other side of the crosscut sled and my finger must have been touching the pencil. And when it happened, I was like, what the hell? Like, I didn't touch this blade. And then my friend was there. And I just see him crippled over laughing on the floor of my shop. And I'm like, no, what happened? And he's like, yeah, you triggered it with the pencil. So mostly I was just confused, less than I was shaken. And then the second time on the aluminum fixture, I was just like, you're an idiot, Ethan.
Oh, that's frustrating for sure.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, so we bought that table saw and I wanted to split it 50-50, but my dad made us split 51-49. So one day I'll slip $11 into his wallet and the saw will be mine. So yeah, if you can't tell, there was really almost never a time that my parents didn't go out of their way to help me grow. And frankly, I don't thank them enough for it. It's been very nice having supportive parents and a good family. But yeah, so as I started my junior year of high school, I spent a weekend at my grandparents' house outside Boston, and they had the captain's cabinet, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but basically when captains would bring their own spices on their ships to cook with, they had these cabinets with a detachable kind of box on top of a stand. And I thought that was really cool. So I made a model and took some dimensions. And then that year I started working on one. And in retrospect, that was my first real piece of furniture. And I did a pretty nice job on it. I had rifts on, walnut legs, mortise and tenon joinery, half-blind, book-matched walnut case sides. And the drawers were made of this weird African wood called opepe, which is kind of funky. And the cabinet
I've never
smells
heard of it.
amazing when you open it up. Yeah, it's a weird wood. It's like kind of orange. It looks like Purdue. So my college essay that I mentioned earlier was kind of a comparison between the box, my Rubik's Cube box, and the captain's cabinet, and how I transitioned as a person. The last line of my essay was, throughout 5 years of hard work and sawdust, I still can't say if I have shaped the wood or the wood has shaped me, which is cringy, but it's true.
Oh
Yeah.
man,
So
it
then
clearly worked. So
yeah,
that's what matters.
yep. Yeah. So then halfway through that year, I started thinking about college. And in typical fashion, my mom found this super interesting guy named Sigus, who's basically the college guy. That's his nickname. And he helps you find a college. Clearly I wasn't a very independent thinker. I guess my mom thought I needed help. And so this guy Sigus comes to your house and he's the college equivalent of the camp ladies. He charges hourly, but he doesn't have a standard rate. His rate is whatever the student makes at their current job. Or if they don't have if they don't have a job at the time, then his rate is one Klondike bar per visit.
That's really cool. Because you
Yeah.
start talking about college consultations, and I'm sitting here like, okay, so how many hundreds of dollars an hour is he charging you guys?
Yeah. Yeah. So at the time I was working at a summer camp and I wasn't getting paid hourly. It was like $600 for the whole summer. So I was like, I can give you $2.38 per hour, or I can give you a Klondike bar. Yeah.
That's
Yep.
really cool. It's
Yeah.
definitely a special person who does that.
Yep. Yeah. So I told him I was into woodworking and just general high quality craftsmanship. And he suggested this school called RIT. And I kind of thought, oh, what does that stand for? Is it Rhode Island Tech, maybe? And he told me it stood for Rochester Institute of Technology and that they had one of the best, if not the best, furniture design program in the world. And that sounded great for a while, except for one thing, which is the fact that unless you're extremely talented and by some stroke of a miracle, you don't make money in life with hand planes and chisels. So that was kind of off the table at that point, as much as I didn't want to hear it. So that got RIT on my mind, but there was other stuff going on at the time. So around the same time I was building that captain's cabinet, build season started for my robotics team that year. And that year, 2018, one of the team dads reached out to a local wood shop, although a wood shop is kind of an insulting understatement. He reached out to the owner of a local wood shop named Paul Downs to see if he'd be willing to sponsor us and help build the practice field. And Paul came to the school, or he came to the school to see the team on kickoff day. And as he walked in, I was modeling the field in SketchUp, and he kind of watched over my shoulder. And I turned around and introduced myself, and we got to talking. And 30 seconds into our conversation, he offered me a summer job, which you'll I guess maybe see that this is kind of a recurring theme where I keep getting offered opportunities that I really haven't proven myself worthy for. Um, but I'm very
Right
thankful
place,
for
right
that.
time kind of thing.
Yep. So Paul took me to his shop, which is pretty big. It's a 25,000 square foot facility in Bridgeport, Pennsylvania, where he and his team of superbly talented designers, salespeople, engineers, and just craftspeople build literally the highest quality conference tables in the world. If you look up conference table maker and Google, they are the number one search result. So it's
Oh wow.
serious stuff. I got to work on tables for NASA, Lockheed Martin, professional sports teams. They built a table for the World Bank. They built one for Moog. Just thousands and thousands of super high quality tables. And so there, Paul introduced me to my all-time favorite piece of machinery. And there's two people right now who I know are listening to this, Max and Nathan, and they already know what I'm about to say. My favorite machine is not the 3-axis Okuma at school. It's not my SawStop table saw. It's not the multi-million-dollar Okuma MU5000 that I've run. It is the Martin sliding panel saw. And this thing is pretty much the end of the line when it comes to precision panel cutting. And when I saw this thing, it's got this 12-foot sliding track. And I said to Paul, what kind of play do you get in a track like that? And he kind of leaned over and quietly said, well, Ethan, I'll let you in on a little secret. The thing is, Germans don't really believe in play. And now as I learn more about Kern and all those other machine tool manufacturers, it occurs to me that he was not kidding. But yeah, this machine was really quite accurate. I'm talking like maybe a thousandth or two over that 12-foot sliding track. It's a 13-inch. Yeah, it's a 13-inch blade with a digitally adjusted rip frame, digitally adjusted crosscut stop, blade height, and blade angle. Like if you got to take 2 thou off the width of a board, this is your saw.
That's crazy.
It's
That
insane.
is like unheard of for,
Yeah.
I guess normal woodworking tools.
Yeah. Yep. And normally you just take a hand plane or a sanding block for 2 seconds and take 2 thou off, but the saw could do it too. So yeah, Paul was my next big supporter. And after a really successful robotics year, we actually went to Worlds and ranked 9th in the world for our autonomous routines. I worked for him that summer, and I think I got 3 raises that summer in a span of maybe 5 weeks. So he must have really thought I was a valuable addition to the shop. And I started off building carts because they assemble a lot of their tabletops on carts, and then they assemble all those tabletops together. And you got to have carts that are all the same height and level. Otherwise, your table's going to be all out of whack. So I worked on that for a while. And then I moved on to building bases. And that's pretty much where I would stay for 4 summers and 2 winter breaks. And not because I didn't want to, not because I didn't want to go anywhere else, but just because I found that really fascinating. And I got the opportunity to work on some tabletops. I worked in veneer. I operated their gantry router for a while. I think it was a 6x12 gantry router. It was a thermwood with a vacuum bed, 18,000 RPM, air assist spindle. And yeah, that was a really awesome opportunity. I got to work with some really cool people, and they were kind enough to let me stay after hours really whenever I wanted, use any offcuts I wanted. They helped me laser cut some veneer to make a custom box for my girlfriend at the time. That was a really nice box. The shop manager there, Ryan, was always super welcoming. Even when I was a 17-year-old kid, no one there really ever had the attitude of, oh, here's this high school kid coming to steal our jobs. People really just wanted to work with me, and it was an awesome experience. Ryan was a little steely at times, but I mean, he's constantly doing the highest level of craftsmanship and being held to it, so it's understandable. And he showed me a lot of cool techniques that really rapidly improved my skills. So then the next year, senior year, I started applying to colleges, and I applied early decision to RIT for mechanical engineering and got accepted in October, which was early. I'm still not sure why that came out so early. That year, Paul sponsored my team again, and again, I worked in the shop. And at this point, I had a fully functioning wood shop in my basement, like a pretty professional setup. Table saw, jointer, planer, bandsaw, router table, disc and belt, combo sander, chop saw, lots of hand tools. And I had a central overhead dust collection system hooked up to an Oneida Cyclone and a 1 micron filter drum. So it was quite the setup.
It's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I was really fortunate to have the equipment that I did. I'm very thankful. I loved having friends over and working on projects with them and helping them make their ideas real. And at the end of that summer, I packed up all my stuff and went off to college and bought all my notebooks, and I got a new Dell laptop, which if anyone ever wants to buy a Dell laptop, do not get an Inspiron 7590. I can talk more about that later if you're interested, but it took 5 replacement laptops for me to finally say, screw you, Dell, I'm done with this. And now I have an HP. But yeah, on the first day of classes, I woke up at 7 a.m. and got breakfast and walked to my first class, Mechie 102. And I sat down, and Professor Robert Carter started talking. And 5 minutes in to the first class on my first day of my first semester of my first year of college, I realized I had made a cosmic mistake. I did not want to be an engineer. Well, more accurately, I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I knew I didn't want to be whatever that class was preparing me for. So I stuck it out for that semester and the following 2 before switching to the new major, like I mentioned, robotics and manufacturing engineering technology, which unfortunately is basically a more concise way of saying, if you didn't think you were good enough for regular mechanical engineering, come on over and we'll make you feel like the smartest person in the room. Because a lot of people, I really do think it's sad. A lot of people switch out of mechanical engineering because they don't think they're good enough for it. And so they think mechanical engineering technology is easier because there's less math and more hands-on. But I mean, it's kind of like the age-old debate of, VOTech versus standard like college education. They're so different and they're really barely comparable that it's not really fair to say that people are dumber in one or the other, because there are plenty of dumb people in both. And so, yeah, pretty much every person from my major that I talked to believes that that department is right for them because they're not smart enough, which is unfortunate. Although in some cases, it's not wrong.
Yeah. I mean, that was a kind of a similar path I went on. Like I went for 2 years straight in mechanical engineering, and then I think good on you for recognizing so quickly that that's not what you wanted to do. Like so what happened is I just was, goofing off and not going to class and stuff because I was like, this is so boring. Like, why do I need to know vector calc? Like, I just want to make stuff. Yep. And like, it never kind of clicked until I ended up going to our local community college just to kind of raise my GPA and get some gen eds done without paying a bunch of money. And that was when I took my first machining class, and like, was like, oh, I'll stay for, a couple classes of this, and like, I'll get my manual machinist certificate. And then that turned into like, oh, I'll get my CNC certificate. I was like, I'm just going to finish out this program because I really liked making stuff. So good on you for recognizing right away that was not what you wanted to do. I'm sure it saved you a lot of heartache and money and everything in between.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about money because tuition is tuition, but yeah, a lot of heartache. Yeah. Yeah. So in that first week of freshman year, my friend Kelly, who lived across the hall from me in freshman dorms and now is another one of my roommates, suggested I join her for a Formula SAE meeting. And I was actually planning on joining the Baja team, which is funny because I know people listening will now be offended. But I figured I'd tag along and see what Formula had to offer. So we went together and checked it out, and I totally fell in love. I met an older member there named Chris, who showed me around the shop and the CNC lab, both of which I would eventually work in. And I started going to regular meetings, machining parts, helping out whenever I could. And then I started to come in on off nights. We meet on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, but I started going in every night of the week, machining parts. And I kind of just became a staple in the freshman team. Every day, 6 to 7 p.m. till 3 to 4 a.m., I'd be there machining parts with my friends. And now that we're kind of talking about the shop, I'll give a little detail about that. We are really fortunate to have the equipment we do. When we go to competition and see other teams' cars and talk to them about their shops, they're always so blown away and jealous of what we have. We've got 12 two-axis CNC prototrack lathes, 4-track two-axis knee mills, 12 manual mills, 2-track bed mills, 3-track BMCs, an Okuma M460, an Okuma L2000, their little baby lathe, all sorts of sheet metal tools, a hydraulic, auto feed Kalamazoo horizontal bandsaw, automatic and manual surface grinder, automatic cylindrical grinder, and there's a Sodic wire in the NTID shop. NTID stands for National Technical Institute for the Deaf. RIT is one of 2 schools in the country that has a government-funded program for deaf and hard of hearing students. So that's a good way to spread the trades, because a lot of them end up going into the trades because it's such a good program there. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. And there's also this massive LeBlond lathe that we call the man lathe. And then, as one of my friends in the shop says, it truly is weaponized incompetence when many students come into the shop to use the equipment. So, like I said, I became a real staple in the shop and the team that year. And I think I machined more parts than anyone that year, including the fabrication lead. And I got a job in the shop during second semester of freshman year, which is pretty unusual for a freshman. And I got along really well with full-time shop staff, Chan, Rick, and Craig. I love those guys. And then COVID hit halfway through second semester, and everything shut down. No more car, no more progress, no more competition. That was pretty much it. And so after we finished that semester, we had a bunch of Zoom meetings for the team for lead and associate elections, and I got elected CNC lead. I was super proud of that because in most years prior to that, the team's at this point 31 years old. So in most years prior to that year, they had kind of just tossed someone into the CNC position, but I was very proud to actually want to do it and want to stick with it. So I started programming parts, and I had used Fusion several times before, but nothing super seriously. And boy, if you want to learn how to program quickly, there's no better way to learn than to program a set of automotive uprights for a 3-axis mill when they were designed for a 5-axis. I don't know how far back you want on my Instagram, but I submitted a picture of those uprights to Okuma for one of their monthly Spindle Wars competitions, and I actually won. So Okuma sent my team like 40 t-shirts, which was cool.
Oh, no way. I didn't realize that. I saw the pictures of the uprights, and those things are insane. Like the fact that you completed those not with a 5-axis, I'm super impressed.
Yeah, that was hard. That was, let's see, first op was a 3-axis op, started from billet and just kind of did the typical top hat method, the carrier stock. And then I in the first op, I would machine through and interpolate a circle to use as an XY locator for the next stop. And then the next stop, I held the thing from the inside of that large bore on a Mighty Bite expansion clamp. And then I would probe X and Y on the hole. And then the Z surface was just the bottom surface that the upright was sitting on. And then machine the other side. And then I put it on manual mill and drilled a couple holes. And then I put it on the 4th axis and put it on another custom ID expansion clamp, did all the radial holes and side pockets. And then there's 2 holes on every upright that are at a compound angle. So what I did was I put it on the expansion clamp and put the clamp on a piece of mic 6. I put the mic 6 on a sine bar in a Kurt vise, and at the correct angle to compensate for half that compound angle. And then I machined this little puzzle piece that fits over the nubs on one end of the upright. And I would rotate the upright by hand, indicating back and forth until it clocked correctly. And that told me that it was at the correct angle. and then I would edge find one corner of the puzzle piece and then drill the holes. And it was terrible, but I got it done. Yeah. Yeah.
That's insane.
So yeah. So then just programming more parts, uprights, like I said, hubs, front wing A-fish, which are those kind of wave shaped parts. I don't know if you saw those. Sprocket carrier, all sorts of wacky stuff. And it kind of became a ritual of staying up till 3 or 4 in the morning every night during the first spring of COVID, just programming. And I started reaching out to sponsors, and I received a shockingly positive reaction. I don't want to get into too many specifics because I don't want to I don't want to piss off any sponsors, but I'll say that between Monster Tool, GWS, IMCO, MMM USA, Shunk, YG1, Mighty Byte, and Tenelum, together every year we get about $200,000 of equipment donated.
That's amazing.
So,
wow.
Yeah. Yep. I think we lost the Monster Tool sponsorship because they got bought out by GWS. But prior to that, we get like $75,000 of end mills from them every year, most of which were 15 thou or smaller. So not very useful, but it was still very kind of them. And this year we received an invitation from YG1 to put our most recent car in their IMTS booth, which if it works out will be awesome.
That'll be epic. That's the F28 that you had on your Instagram?
Yep. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Our contact there is kind of bad at replying to emails, so I haven't gotten much information about it, but I'm hoping it works out. Yeah, because that would be really cool. And then when we all came back the fall after COVID, there was this literally unused Okuma M460VE and the CNC half of the shop that had been delivered that past winter. And I got some training from a recent graduate and then was pretty much permitted to run that machine whenever I wanted. So I ran the crap out of that machine, just cranking out parts. And for 2 years on a campus of 25,000 people, including the shop managers, I was the only person who knew how to use that machine.
Really?
Which is pathetic, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Tell me about it. It's pathetic. So the 3 managers of the manual side of the shop showed some interest, and I kind of went over the basics with them. But the manager of the CNC half, who I'll get into later, this is a whole thing. He was actively avoiding it, which is beyond me. Yeah.
I mean, it's like got to be one of the nicest machines you guys have.
Yeah, it is the nicest machine. It's actually now broken because when I was gone, nobody took care of it. And I told them to clean the coolant tank and the high pressure unit, and they didn't. And then they pumped chippy coolant through the spindle at 1,000 PSI and destroyed the rotary union.
No.
Yeah. And so that machine is probably going to be down for a very long time. If it's anything like the water jet that was down for 2 years, this probably 12 by 16 water jet. The dryers in our compressors in the basement broke and pumped hard water through all the lines, like literally gallons of water. So this water jet was broken for 2 years. And on the 2-year anniversary of the water jet being broken, I went to Wegmans and got a cake with a picture of the shop manager's face on it. And it said, "Happy 2-year water jet anniversary." So I'm just a little bit salty.
Yeah, just a little bit. Just like the airline system of the machine, right?
Yes, exactly. Yep. So I eventually got a job in that half of the shop. It's called the Brinkman Lab, named after Earl Brinkman, who was a machinist and I think a pretty significant donor to shops and schools in the New York area. And just got a lot of good experience there, running the crap out of that mill and the lathe, ripping off some material with wicked brand new end mills from all these companies. And everyone started to realize that I knew what I was doing. And so, like I said, I got that job. And then that semester, I got to go to a local sponsor, MWI, which is a huge graphite machining place. And I got to run and program their massive bridge mills to machine a bunch of foam molds for a composites group. And I love going there because they just have some ridiculous tools. For hogging out one of our chassis molds, I got to use a 5-inch inserted helical mill with 4-inch length of cut on a 20-inch gauge length Cat 50 arbor.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that was beefy. Yep.
That's insane.
Yep.
And you're using that to cut foam?
Yep. Oh man, it just chews it up. Full depth, full width, couple hundred inches per minute, like 2,000 or 3,000 RPM, not much. It just chews it up. And you can actually make chips if you give it enough feed per tooth.
That's crazy. What kind of work holding then?
They have vacuum tables on most of their machines. So if the piece of foam was flat enough And if the foam was dense enough, because we have a couple different kinds of foam, we could use the vacuum. Otherwise, we'd use a big inserted key seat cutter and cut a slot all the way around the base and then use toe clamps.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because you need some serious work holding for cut parameters like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the foam cuts pretty easily, but it does get a little shisty. So yeah, through various sponsors and just a constant effort to make small improvements daily, I've really transformed our CNC group into what I think is unequivocally the most efficient and most diligent and best documented group on my team. And I'm not just saying that because I'm in it. I really do believe that we are the most streamlined group. And so I'm really proud of what I've done, especially with the limited time being a student. And I implemented, a fixture inventory system. I transferred us to Fusion Teams instead of Mastercam because we were on a server before that. And then someone built an e-waste rig and infected the whole thing, and we lost a lot of files. So Fusion Teams from now on. I built some really sturdy posts for all our machines, and really just a lot of quality of life things. Tool racks, collet racks, dedicated cabinets. The Brinkman Lab donated a manual Brandon Sharp CMM, which I think is the one you have, right? The Gauge 2000.
Yeah, so mine's a pre-Gauge 2000, but same deal. Reflex box controlled and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, so no PCDMS for us, but it's still manual, and we can still establish datums and all the stuff CMMs can do. Right now,
to be honest, I think Reflex is a little more user-friendly than PCDMS is anyway.
Yeah, you might be right. Yeah. Right now, I'm working on a 0-point pallet system that'll mount our 6-inch vise and a Shunk KSC 125 and a bunch of other fixtures because fifth axis and Lang are expensive, and I am a student.
Sure are. I'm surprised Fifth Axis wouldn't want to sponsor your team. That seems like right up their alley.
Yeah, they sponsored the Baja team. I just haven't really reached out. Yeah. Also, I'm going to give a shameless plug. If anyone is interested in buying a 1990, I think it's a 1990s CompuMill, you should hit me up. It's got a CRT display and it drip feeds RS-232 through Simco, and we no longer have good use for it. It's got an NMTB30 spindle, and we got a lot of tool holders. We bought it like 25 years ago. So if you're looking for a beater machine or something to do some research on, we'll sell it to you for cheap. And so I'm kind of getting to the end of my experience, getting up to current date. That next semester, I work for Autodesk as a student ambassador of Fusion 360. I have a love-hate relationship with Fusion, like most people, but it was a cool position. I got to run classes on campus, teaching people how to use Fusion. I was kind of like the manufacturing specialist, and there were 2 other guys who were the design and animation specialists. And I got to meet some cool people. And I experienced for the first time this thing that I call the makerspace effect, which I can talk about later if you're interested. You may kind of already understand what I'm getting at. And
Possibly,
then the next one, Fusion 360 and makerspaces. What could go wrong?
Yes.
Yep. So the next semester, I worked for this guy, Rob, in the Brinkman Lab, and rapidly realized that, maybe he's not the best machinist, to put it very lightly. I don't want to speak poorly because I don't want to be disrespectful. And I know that there's a chance he'll listen to this, but I'll very briefly say that I once had to explain to him the difference between a PDF and a toolpath. And on another occasion, a student came into the lab and asked if he could put a Raspberry Pi in the electrical cabinet of the machine for an Amazon Web Services machine monitoring project he was working on. And we had to explain to him that the kid did not, in fact, want to put a fruit pie in his electrical cabinet. And okay. I'm gonna cut myself off there.
Yeah.
So moving on. I continued working my ass off on the team, and at that point, I had made about 1,500 parts in 2 years, which is a lot considering that I'm constantly in setup mode. I mean, we're the textbook definition of high mix, low volume. Very rarely do I make more than 2 of a part. So I had a friend who did a co-op for Moog in their additive division, which has now pretty much disbanded because they weren't making money. And I reached out to him to see if they were looking for co-ops, and they were, and I got the job. My friend Evan, who I'm now living with in Buffalo, also applied and got the job. So I wrapped up that semester and headed off to East Aurora. And like I said about Moog, I should preface by saying I did do my research to make sure everything that I'm saying is either public knowledge or readily available. So I don't think I'll get in any trouble. So I started off there doing sinker and wire programming and fixture design and prove-outs, which was super interesting because I was really starting from ground zero. I really didn't understand much about it. EDM is just such a different beast your quote unquote speeds and feeds are just they're just not speeds and feeds. There's so many parameters. So I got good with NX and Esprit, and I wasn't sure about sharing NX and Esprit, but they told me about it during the job interview, and I didn't have the job at the time, so I'm pretty sure it's fine. And I got to work on some awesome parts for all sorts of military aircrafts, like I mentioned before. And EDM is interesting for a period of time, but eventually, it becomes dull when the parts of programming are so similar. So eventually I moved into the 40 taper mill group, 3 through 5 axis. And I won't share the names of specific parts, but stuff for those aircrafts, like I mentioned. My main job is pretty much taking old parts and reprocessing them onto newer machines.
That's got to be a really
Um,
cool job because, like, when you're doing prototypes, it's you have nothing to compare to. You're like, well, I think I did okay, but like you
yeah,
have a baseline. You're like, I just need to beat this, or like make it easier, or make it easier to hold tolerance or something. So that must be really nice.
yeah. It's been an awesome experience. Like Adam from Laney Machine Tech said when he was on here, it is such a privilege to be the dumbest person in every room you walk into because everybody has something to teach you.
Definitely, yeah,
Yeah,
that is a really special place to be.
yeah. So yeah, I'm running there. I'm running an Okuma 5-axis MU 5000. I don't want to get into work order or anything because some of that's trade secret. But if you haven't figured it out, I am a diehard Okuma fanboy, just like Easton's. Just like Easton is a diehard Japanese machine tool fanboy. I absolutely love their machines. I actually, the other day when I posted a video of the Stormtrooper helmet that I machined, some guy on Instagram reached out to me and asked if I was an Okuma apps engineer, which was that was very flattering. And I politely informed him that I'm just a 20-year-old, 21-year-old college student with a soft spot for the OSP control.
I mean, it does very
Um,
much look like a IMTS demo or something. It was
yeah,
very impressive.
thank you. I appreciate that. That was the goal. Yep. Well, the main goal was to get more experience in simultaneous finishing and do some post processor testing and kind of get more into it. But it was also just an opportunity to make something cool. The other co-op there is working on a similarly sized Darth Vader head, so that'll be really cool.
It's very impressive that a company of that size would give you guys free reign like that too. Like
Yeah.
I
So
really applaud them for doing that because I mean, I've worked in small shops that won't let you do that kind of stuff and learn on your own time. So for a company that large and with that kind of work envelope or portfolio to let you guys do that is really special.
yeah, I'm very thankful. Both of my managers are super kind and very knowledgeable. And I think there's a couple of reasons that we're able to get away with that. Number one, like I said, the programs that I'm working on are going to save them orders of magnitude more money than it costed to buy that stock. Number two, that kind of stock is something that they pretty readily stock in house. And number three, since it is such a big company, you can get away with stuff like that because it just never makes its way up the food chain, if you will. People don't really hear about it up top. And even if they did, I doubt they would care.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I mean, I've talked about it on the show a bunch. Projects like that really are where you learn the important stuff. Like you can only experiment so much when you're working on customer parts, but when it's your own,
Yep.
you might try that tool path that you've never used before or that you thought might not work, but ended up being perfect for it or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, you're totally right. Last night I stayed late. I don't know if you saw my story, but I machined an impeller just for fun.
Yeah, that was
Um,
insane. Like
yeah,
that's where'd you get the model for that?
I made it.
No way.
Yeah, I sent it to Drew from TrueFab last night because he replied to my story. I have this parametric impeller model. If anyone wants it, just send me a DM and I'll send it to you.
That's really
Yep.
cool. So is that Fusion based or is that NX based?
I did it in Fusion so that I could keep the model because any of the stuff I do at work, I can't send myself the models.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So the Stormtrooper helmet, I'm going to try and convince people higher up to let me keep the model. But I think at this point, since it's in our file system, it probably has some trade secret attributes and stuff. I mean, it might have some information that I'm not allowed to take.
Right.
Yeah. So another thing that I really like about Moog is that from day one, they assumed that I knew everything and only taught me the things that I asked about. Or they didn't assume I knew everything, but they assumed I knew a lot and they took my word for the things I said I knew. When it came time for me to run the machines, nobody asked me if I knew what I was doing. Nobody told me what to do. Nobody wanted to watch me first. They didn't even ask if I had any questions. I was just like, all right, I know what I'm doing. And they said, okay, don't crash. And that was that.
How cool.
Um, yeah. So same thing with the EDM stuff, although it's hard to crash a sinker because have you done any sinker programming?
I think I've done one program. The school I went to had one sinker and one wire, and the EDM class was very lacking. Like they only ran
Mm-hmm.
it. So the school I went to had a policy that every class in the portfolio had to be run every 2 years, regardless of how many students were in it.
Right.
And the semester I happened to take it, the sinker, I think we did a little bit of work on, and then the wire was broken for 80% of the time we were supposed to be on it. And so we kind of
Yeah.
rushed through a spree, rushed through getting it done. And it, like, most classes were spent just like shooting the shit with the teacher and not really doing anything because we were just waiting on them to fix it. So
Yeah.
I am by no means any expert or authority on sinker or wire.
Yeah. Well, neither am I, but I know a little bit. But it's pretty hard to crash a sinker because effectively every tool is a probe and it's constantly, looking for that closed loop. So if anything in your spindle touches anything on the table, it will stop. And it's got linear motors. So this thing is lightning quick. And even at full rapid, if you crash, it will stop itself if it's not expecting something. So yeah, those are pretty hard to crash. And so I'll stay late once in a while and do a quick project as long as I ask my main mentor, Nick, who's super knowledgeable. Um, my conceptual knowledge of EDM is still pretty basic, but Nick has a really strong grasp of it. He's a really cool guy. And so yeah, working at Moog has been an awesome experience. My co-op block ends in 2 weeks. And I can honestly say that I don't think I've had a single interaction with anybody that has been anything less than totally positive. Everybody is so nice. Everybody wants to learn. Well, all the engineers want to learn, and 99.9% of the machinists are positive and nice to me. The other day, I was washing a part off in one of the wash tanks using the air gun to dry it off. And some guy was like, hey, you might want to walk over to the other, their air hose over there because some guy's trying to sleep over there. I was like, he's trying to sleep. What are you talking about? Like, he's supposed to be doing his job. But
Oh
yeah,
man.
so they're looking out for each other. Just it's a very positive workplace. I would definitely recommend applying there if you get the chance. So yeah, like I said, my manager was very gracious and allowed me to machine that Stormtrooper head. And that pretty much wraps up Moog as well as the impeller. For my next co-op, I don't think I'll work at Moog, even though I know that I could if I wanted to, just because I think it's important to get experience elsewhere. I think it would be irresponsible to just keep going back to the same place when other opportunities are open. I am actually looking at working with Alex Kern at Art Quakertown or Bosley Tool. I haven't really gotten a job offer, but it's just kind of an informal, you've got the job kind of thing. So I'm really excited to potentially work on the Kern and the Willamets. That'd be fun.
Yeah, Alex and I were talking about that, and they said you guys might be working together. That. It looks like such a cool place to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I took a tour there last summer when I was driving up to Rochester for the start of school, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on there. Yep.
That's great.
So that's pretty much brings us up to date. I've got a spreadsheet going with every part I've ever made at school. Like I said, sitting around 1,500 parts, and my scrap rate is 3.058%.
Dang,
pretty good.
That's really good.
Yeah, I've only scrapped 43 parts.
Wow, that is really impressive.
Yeah,
definitely shows that you take your time.
Yeah, I do take my time. And I mean, I take my time, but also work quickly because you can be cautious and not crash and still run aggressively. You know that. Yeah, so
let's get into some questions then. We've got a whole bunch. Yeah. First one, M. Mirandola asks, what's your favorite first robotics memory?
My favorite first robotics memory is also my most stressful memory from first robotics. In junior year, when my team qualified for Worlds, we booked a coach bus to drive us there along with a bunch of other stuff, like all our tools and equipment. And it was supposed to show up at, I think, 7 or 8 p.m. And around 10 p.m., we were still waiting, and we got a call from the bus company saying the transmission or some axle had broken. And we didn't actually believe it. We think they were just scamming us the whole time. And everybody was just panicking, shitting their pants. And we eventually, our head mentor, on his own personal credit card, booked like 30 people's flights on a last minute flight to Detroit the next morning at 5 a.m. So we
Jeez.
all packed our stuff up and went home. A couple friends came home with me, and everybody kind of partnered up and just went home together. And then we got to the airport at 3 or 4 in the morning, and we couldn't ship our batteries with the robot, so we had to take our big 12-volt batteries on the plane. And so we basically just gave everybody a battery. Here, you take a battery, you take a battery. Everyone put it in their carry-on, and you just see the TSA agents looking at these massive batteries on the X-ray, and it looks very suspicious. But eventually, we did make it to Detroit, and we did really well. We captained number 5 Alliance. We lost in quarterfinals, but we did really well, and it was just a good experience.
Yeah, overcoming obstacles like that always end up with like a good story and a good feeling. That's wonderful.
Yep.
Hermit Shed asks, please talk about track controls and how using a VMC2 and TMC5 is compared to other brands.
Okay, yeah. So the track control is pretty much as basic as it gets, but at the same time, you can still do cool stuff with it. It will simulate your tool paths. You can't simulate actual material removal, as far as I know. Actually, no, I think you can, but I don't do it. It's pretty bare bones. It's not like an OSP or a FANUC where you can number stop or number search or sequence restart. The tool library is pretty limited. There's no MDI, which is interesting.
Oh, that's bizarre.
The machine that I'm using, I think the machine that I use, the TMC5, was the first of its kind in the country, and it still has some weird beta software on it. And Track markets it as the world's first tool room VMC. So it's got a little key on it to switch between tool room and production ops. And as far as I know, that key is pretty much pointless because the only thing I've been able to tell that it does is disable and enable the tool changer.
I was just about to ask you what the difference between tool room and production actually means, but
yeah,
I guess that's the difference. A tool changer.
Yeah. So that machine is really weird. It's full CNC 3-axis control, but it's got electronic hand wheels for X, Y, and Z. So X and Y are on the front of the machine, just like a normal one, but they're right by the door. You don't have to walk around the side of the machine to jog the X axis. And the Z handle is actually like a standard quill on a drill press or a Bridgeport. It is on the Z axis inside the enclosure, and you spin it and you can lean into the machine and drill holes with this electronic quill. And it's very weird.
I don't know why, but it feels wrong when you say that. Like lean into a CNC and control it. I mean, I guess that's the point of having these electronic wheels, but that's very bizarre.
Yeah, I've used them once to drill a 1/4-inch hole, and I hated it because you have no feedback, because it's all electronic. And then the only other time I use it is to jog the edge finder around because there's no such thing as probing in the land of ProtoTrack, other than their new machine that they're doing a partnership with Siemens with, and that one has probing and tool setting. So
interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the ProtoTrack deal.
So I'm on their website, and it looks like the switch between tool room and production also changes the rapid feed rate. But I'm not seeing much else.
Yeah, those machines are already pretty slow, so it's probably not very noticeable. Yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, we talked about it a little bit before the show started. How do you guys have all these tracks, and like, what's the deal there? If you can talk about it.
Yeah. So ProtoTrack and the mechanical engineering shop at RIT have this deal where occasionally we will buy machines that we plan to keep, but a lot of our machines are actually they're kind of on consignment, and so in return, a few specially trained people get to use them, and whenever ProtoTrack wants, they can section off the shop and bring in customers and do demos on those machines or do testing and research. There is one ProtoTrack VMC, the LPM, that does belong to us, and that one's got a 4th axis. So that one gets kind of railed. But otherwise, we keep the machines in good condition for ProtoTrack, and in return, we get to use them.
That's a really nice offer and like ability. Yeah. Sounds like the shop is really well outfitted because of it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Tux Garage has a couple part question. First one, what do you do in your free time?
What do I do in my free time? Well,
do you have any free time? I guess is maybe a better question.
Yeah, so during the school year, the answer is no, I have no free time. And I when I was looking at the questions, I was surprised that nobody asked about a school and formula balance. And to be honest, sometimes there is not a balance. Sometimes it is all formula. I strongly believe that if you're in an engineering major and you're not on a project team, you are getting at most 20 or 30% of the experience that people on project teams are getting. It's just they're not comparable. So yeah, my free time, I don't really have much during the school year. Right now, my free time after work, I either stay late and machine stuff or keep programming, or I come home and I design fixtures and work with my teammates on projects and provide guidance, listen to
Okay.
music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make parametric
Impeller
blisks and
models.
yeah, impellers. Exactly.
Yeah.
Next part of his question: what would your dream job be?
My dream job would be pretty much what I'm doing right now at Moog. I love what I do because budget is pretty much open ended. We pretty much have a blank check. I love working on these new machines. Reprocessing parts has been really cool because I get to learn about old processes and the new ones that I'm designing. I get to work with awesome people. So my dream job would be kind of a combination between programmer, setup guy, and machinist, just playing all three roles. So yeah, I guess having my own shop maybe would be my dream job. But yeah,
Okay. And then last one was favorite ice cream flavor.
cookie dough, far and
Okay.
away.
And he
Yep.
says, hello from Buffalo.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I saw that. He's in Buffalo. Maybe we should meet up. Send me a direct message.
All right. Next, Kate Ptak asks, what's your favorite thing you've ever machined?
The favorite thing I've ever machined. Well, number one, I is a little inappropriate and I shouldn't share on here. Number two is the Stormtrooper helmet, and number three is the impeller I made.
Okay. That impeller was killer. Was that aluminum or something else?
Yeah, that's 6061. Yeah.
Okay. And then did you program it in Fusion as well, or was that programmed with NX?
Yeah, that was programmed in NX.
Okay. Because I know it seems like for years now, people are constantly asking, like, oh, well, what if I wanted to do an impeller in Fusion? And, everybody's answer is like, well, you could do it, but like,
Yeah, sucks for you.
not, yeah, not efficiently.
Yeah. So NX has impeller toolpaths, but we don't have the license for them. And they're right there. The buttons are right there. And it's just taunting me. You click on it, it says no license available. And I'm just like, come on, man. Give me the impeller toolpaths.
So what kind of toolpaths does NX have that allowed you to do that easily? That you do have license for?
So NX has pretty much everything Fusion has and then some. There are about 5 or 6 different ways you can do a 2D contour, and they're all pretty much the same, which is ridiculous. There's a lot of multi-axis stuff. I think there's maybe 15 multi-axis toolpaths. The toolpath that I used for the hub and the inside of the blades was a variable axis guiding curves. So basically it's like the blend toolpath in Fusion where you give it drive surfaces and then drive curves, and then it draws lines morphing between the two curves. And then it was multi-axis. So then I give it a max tilts and lead, and then my axis avoidance is set to tilt and turn. So basically I just give it a clearance amount and it tilts and turns based on whatever it needs to. NX has this really cool feature in all multi-axis toolpaths where you can drive the axis parametrically, or they call it like parametric interpolate, where you can select points on a model and then select the vector that you want the tool to be at when it's at that point. And then it will morph between all your specified points and vectors and create this really nice, smooth, very controlled toolpath.
Wow, that's nuts. That sounds
Yeah.
super cool.
Yeah.
So were you just relying on the built-in simulation in an NX for collision avoidance?
So I didn't use NX machine simulation for that. We use a different verification software, which
Okay.
I won't name because I don't know if I can, but we use a verification software. And then the Akuma control has verification built in called CAS. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I think so. It's one of those pretty neat features that they have. They have like that and Machine Navi that both seem
Yeah.
very next gen.
Yep. Yeah. So you can import STL files of your work holding and your stock, and it's got a machine model that comes built in, and you can put it in machine lock dry run, and then you can watch it on the control, and it will tell you if you're going to crash. And if you crash in the simulation, you can bet your bottom dollar that you're going to crash in real life. The only downside is that it doesn't tell you, it turns off CAS when you're in simultaneous, when you're in TCP, which is kind of silly. Which is kind of silly because you'd think that's when you would want it.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah. So that's when you rely on your your verification software.
Okay. Yeah, because I think I've even seen Akuma has videos of like when you turn it on, you could like jog the
Yep.
spindle, towards a chuck on a multi-axis machine, and it'll just stop before it hits anything,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
is
That's
pretty
exactly
neat.
what it does. Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, your future possible employer, Alex Kern, had a bunch of questions as well. His first one: when is RIT going to win FSAE?
Well, my team sucks now. We haven't had a good car in like 5 years. We always do really well in design, like top three in the country, maybe even world. I think country. We have won competitions in the past and we have done very well at competitions in the past. So yeah, that kind of answers the question. It might be a little while. We're going to try and do
Okay.
a hub motor car in the next 3 or 4 years, which will be awesome.
So I was looking on their website earlier. Is all of the competition now hybrid based, or is there a hybrid class and then a normal gas powered?
So there is a normal combustion, a normal electric. I can't speak for hybrid. I don't know much about it. The all girls Formula team on RIT's campus, Hot Wheels, they were hybrid for several years, and they competed. I don't know if that's still like an official thing, the hybrid class. Now they're doing a solar car, which is cool.
Oh, very cool. So
Yep.
who is like the top teams in the country right now, or
In
top
terms of in
teams?
terms of performance, Michigan is always number one,
Really?
as you might expect. I mean,
Yeah, I guess that's true. The automakers have to make sure that that's true.
yep. Back in the RT glory days, which, that's cringy, but back in the RT glory days, we were very good. Now we're just good designers. Can't seem to put a functioning car together, though. Yeah, I'm really actually not into the car side of it. I'm really just into the manufacturing side. So my knowledge of teams and F1 as well, it's quite lacking. So that's
Okay.
really the best answer I can give you.
All right. Well, Alex's next question was, what's your favorite feature of a Kuma milling machine?
Well, on the 5 axis, probably the CAS. That's very nice. On on the 3 axis, my favorite feature, probably tool ATC recovery. That's saved me so many times. One time I accidentally hit reset in the middle of a tool change, and I was able to really easily recover it. You pretty much go to like machine operation, and you just hit step back, step back, step back, step back. Sometimes you got to hold down interlock, release, step back, and it just rewinds the ATC because it's all servo driven. And then one time I actually wasn't able to recover it, and I found a way in the control to remap the ATC servo to the x-axis on the jog pendant. So instead of jogging the x-axis, it would actually jog the ATC double arm. So I just like slowly jogged the ATC arm away from the spindle, and I put a little cardboard box under it because otherwise it would have dropped a 3-inch face mail onto the table.
Oh boy, that sounds like, looking back on it, a great fix, but it could have been so sketchy.
Yeah, it was very sketchy remapping the ATC double arm to the to the x-axis on the jog pendant. Yeah,
His next thing was something hardwood.
everybody likes to make that joke.
And then his last question I thought was a great one, which was, would you recommend young kids interested in the trade go to college or go right into manufacturing, and why?
Okay, so I say for people like me who are like avid learners, but also must have their hands on things, I would recommend kind of my path, which is going to school, but going to school for some kind of hands on technical major and being on a project team or some kind of club where you get to build things, because that's very, very valuable. If you have absolutely no interest in engineering and fixture design and all that, then maybe Votech is for you, even though you'll still learn that kind of stuff there. If you hate, theoretical math and BS calculations all day, Votech is for you. And if you want absolutely nothing to do with manufacturing and you just want to be doing design work, then I would say traditional like college, 4-year university is probably for you.
So what does your course load look like in that major? Like, what kind of classes are you taking?
I forget exactly what I'm taking this coming semester, but last semester I took computational problem solving, which is a C++ course. I took automation control systems, which is PLC programming. I took a basic circuits class. I think that was it for like my core classes, and then a couple other electives. Yeah. Oh, advanced table tennis. I took advanced ping pong. That was fun. That's my wellness class.
That's great. That
Yep.
sounds like a really like a lot of fun course load though, like, and definitely
Yeah.
avoids a lot of those theory only classes that can be really boring.
Yeah. The class that did me in was thermodynamics. I just, man, looking up numbers and tables all day. I was just like, what am I doing here? I'm just looking through tables. I could write you a MATLAB script that does this.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. I know I ended up taking, I think, all of every calculus class at least twice because I was just so bored and like, uh, my school kind of screwed me as well. Like every time I took calculus the first time, I would have a TA who didn't give a shit, or like one year they had brought over this professor from Japan who spoke very broken English to teach us Calc 2, like 3 days before the semester started. And so I just did not do well in that. I was not self motivated to read the book and learn things because I didn't want to really be there. And then on top of it, to go to class and not understand half of what was going on didn't help the subject.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are still TAs who don't care. In one of my metals labs, I got some value in an Excel spreadsheet that was something like 35,000% error. And the TA was just like, yeah, we don't really care as long as you get the concept. Okay.
You're like, I'm not sure I got the concept though. This is way
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh boy. LHM Engineering said, "Hey Ethan, why is RIT Baja so much better than Formula?"
Yeah. So that's my friend. He just graduated. Now he has his own shop in, I think, outside Boston. He's got a Hermley, which is pretty awesome for someone our age.
Going
Why
through
is
his Instagram and was drooling over his machine for sure.
Yeah. Is it a C250?
I want to say his was a C400, so same machine,
Okay.
just bigger.
Yeah. Why is Baja better than us? Boy. Well, there's two things I can think of. Number one, you guys skip classes to go machine parts. And number two, your people are more dedicated than ours, which is a hot take, but it's true.
I have a feeling you're going to catch some heat from this episode.
I might, yeah. But the thing is, like, I haven't told a lie yet.
Oh, NYDLS30 asked, RIT, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Oh boy. Well, there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad and there's a lot of ugly. My experience at RIT, tomorrow I may love it, the next day I may hate it, and the next day I may be like, yeah, I can do this. When I love it, I'm in the shop and I'm machining parts and I'm meeting cool people and I'm working with cool designs and I'm learning things. When it's bad, I'm in class, to be frank. And the ugly, my biggest gripe with RIT is how superficial they are. RIT is so, they just straight up lie to their tour groups when they walk people down this big hallway in the Gleason Engineering Building with glass windows looking into the Brinkman Lab, and glass windows, you know what I mean, with windows looking into the Brinkman Lab. You see the Okuma, which is now down and probably will be down for a while. You see the water jet that was broken for 2 years. You see the piece of shit plasma cutter that took 6 months and a guy from Italy to fix. You see this 5-axis hard hinge machine. That machine is actually pretty cool. It's got additive and subtractive capabilities.
That's really neat.
They retrofit this head that actually goes in the tool changer, and then they tool change it in. And then there's this device that comes out of a little garage door above the spindle and docks with the tool in the spindle, and then that allows them to deposit powder. But yeah, so you see all these machines, and most of them either don't work or there's one person on the entire campus who knows how to run them, and they just straight up lie about them. I hear them talking about the metal 3D printer that was supposed to be donated, but it wasn't. We bought it for $400,000 and it's never made a good print in its entire life. Another good instance of superficiality, I think that's a word. RIT got a huge donation from a recent graduate, I think $50 million. And they put it towards building a new, I guess, makerspace type building that they're calling the Shed, the student home for early development, I think, or maybe engineering development. And they are moving a bunch of the project teams into that building, which is a huge problem because they're moving Hot Wheels and EVT, which is the electric vehicle team. They build an electric bike every year. And Hot Wheels and EVT thrive because they are right next to the ME shop, and so is Formula. And it's a huge resource for us We can take material off the shelves, machine parts whenever we want, 24/7. We all have 24/7 swipe access, and they're moving Hot Wheels and EVT into this shed building with glass walls. Everybody can see in. All the tour guides can see them. They're putting them in the same room. There aren't going to be any locked doors. There's going to be no dividers between the teams. There's just going to be no privacy. And they're doing it because they want all these teams together because it looks good, not because they actually care about the results that these teams produce. And that's really frustrating, seeing how superficial RAT can be.
That is really frustrating. So what ended up causing them to repair the water jet?
Higher ups, pretty much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the water jet was down, and Rob kept saying, I'll fix it, I'll fix it, I'll fix it. It'll be done next week. It'll be done next month. I just need one more solenoid, yada, yada, yada. And eventually it did get fixed. And then Rob took a vacation, a week-long vacation, actually in Arizona, I think, without telling anybody. And we went to go run the water jet because we heard it was fixed. And we turned it on, and water came pissing out of the pump at 50,000 PSI. So that was a problem.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, what prompted him to fix it was people telling him to do it. And I think probably a threat to his job.
So we need to start a cold call campaign to higher ups at IRT to get you guys your Akuma fixed, apparently.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, so I should clarify. There's a bit of a story. When they bought the Akuma mill, they did not get probing, and I told them to get probing. I told them to get a tool setter, and even after they bought the machine and it was delivered, I was pressing them to reach out to Renishaw. They'd probably give you an educational discount, or you look at the Bloom system, even though it's a $40,000 optical tool setter. And of course, they sprung for that, and it got delivered, and it sat in a box for 3 months. And then finally, when they tried to install it, I guess the skip signal is like an option on the OSB control, and they didn't get it. So they had to get a Morris tech in to come install it, and it came on a CD, and there was no there's no place to plug in a CD on it. $200,000 brand new 3-axis machine. Right. So we had to find a computer that had a CD receptacle on it, and then put it on a flash drive, and then plug it into the machine, and that was a mess. And then that night, after it all got installed, I wrote a bunch of macros and routines. I modified our post to do in-process probing, tool breakage detection. I did all this cool stuff, knowing full well that I would probably be the only one using it, but I made it fully available. And then the following semester, we had made Rob's face the background on the Okuma control, just because it was funny. And Rob's boss knew about it, and he said it was ironic because, there was only one person using the machine, but Rob didn't find it so funny. And so when he saw that, after finally using the machine 2 years in, he got pretty pissed and basically said, no more project teams. And I said, that's fine. It's your prerogative. I got to respect that. But if you're kicking me out, the probing macros are coming with me. And so he stood with me at the machine, and he allowed me to delete the macros off the machine because they were mine. And I put my name on them in the header and all that, name and date. And I even created a backup of the machine at the time to be able to prove to him that they were mine. And then a couple hours later, I get a phone call from Rob's boss, ripping pissed. Why'd you delete system files? Now we can't use the machine, yada, yada, yada. And so my theory is that someone told a lie that I deleted system files. And so now I am actually not allowed to run that machine anymore because of some hurt feelings and some lies. So even if they do end up fixing that machine, it's not going to matter because nobody to run it.
That's super frustrating.
Yep.
There is so much, or there's so many toxic egos in machining, but it's unfortunate that you had to encounter one. I mean, I'm really glad that it sounds like the place you spend a lot of your time making parts is not like that, but it sounds like a very, very nice space to work. So.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Next question. NT Chinny asked, how long has Ethan been machining?
So I've been machining and woodworking for almost 10 years now. I think the end of this summer will be 10 years, I think.
Okay. And he said, what's his schedule look like on a normal work day?
Normal work day. Well, I get up at 6 or 7, depending on if I want to be there at 7 or 8. And I go in, program parts. Sometimes we go out to lunch. Then, just more programming. Sometimes toolset drawings, setting up, running machines, sending parts to FAI. Then, come home, do some more programming for Formula. I've been watching Breaking Bad recently, even though I've seen it already. And yeah, eat dinner and go to bed and do it all again.
And then what about a normal class day? How much is spent? You kind of had talked about balance with FSAE. So like,
Yeah.
what's a typical school day look like for you?
Well, on some days, last semester I only had classes 4 days of the week. So on those 4 days, get up in the morning, 7 or 8, go to classes. The shop is kind of like the home base for all the people on my team. So when we're not in classes, but we don't feel like going back home, we just come to the shop and do homework. So I spend a couple hours there every day. And then when classes are done, usually go get dinner and then machine parts from 6 or 7 till however late I want. Usually 12, 1, 2, 3 in the morning. And then go home, get 4 hours of sleep, and do it all again. And I love it.
Okay. And then the last one I thought was very interesting. Are there any times that you've had to overcome projects that were dreadful but worth it in the end? And I mean, I think your story about the whole bus thing with First was definitely one of them. But what about other either school projects or work projects? What's been dreadful but worth it at the end?
Okay, yeah. So the main one that I can think of, or there's two. The first one was programming the uprights. That I reached out to so many people on Instagram asking for toolpath suggestions, asking for people to review the model and tell me if there's anything I could ask the designer to make simpler. That was really hard to program, and I spent probably 4 months over COVID programming that. And then the next time I made uprights, I went down from 4 months programming time to 8 hours. And then the third time I made uprights, I did it in an hour. So
Oh
that
wow.
was really worth it, and I'm really proud of the work that I put in. The second thing was a really confusing night that I had. The night after the tool setter got installed on the 3-axis Okuma, I was having this problem where I would run programs, or I'd start running programs, and the rapid from the tool change position over to the XY would be fine, and then the plunge with the length offset would be fine. But then as soon as I got to the feed plane, it would hesitate with each block of code and I couldn't figure out what it was. Exact stop wasn't on. Look ahead, as far as I knew, was not off. And I just could not figure out what it was. And so I went on the Mastercam forum because there's a surprising amount of Okuma information on the Mastercam forum. And I found some guy from like 10 years ago who said, you should go to your machine parameters and check bit 7, number 2, or maybe bit 2, number 7, and see if it's off. And somehow the calibration of the tool setter had turned off look ahead. And I
Oh,
turned it on.
weird.
And it was all smooth sailing from there.
Those probing macros can really throw you for a loop. Like they do
Yeah.
so much, and unless you're like literally going through them line by line, yeah, they really can screw you over sometimes.
Yep. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, that
Yep.
brings us to shop news and new things. What's new in your world?
New in my world. Well, Stormtrooper and Impeller. I'm looking at selling that comping mill, like I said, and maybe buying like a small track VMC to actually be team property. Just general quality of life stuff in the shop. I don't know if you saw that Pearson video about the QR codes, but I'm going to start doing that for all of our stuff in our team room that freshmen will be using, so they don't have to keep asking questions.
That's a great idea.
Not that I don't like questions, but some of them are easily answered. I think that's pretty much it for shop news and new things. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that brings me then to the last question I ask every guest every week, which is, what did you research this week? And it could be anything under the sun. Doesn't have to be machining or formula related, but just what's been popping up in your browser.
Okay. So I thought about this one, and I've got a pretty good one, and it has stumped me and everyone else that I brought the problem to, and I'm curious to see if it will stump everyone else too. So I have to be careful here, but there's a part that I'm working on at work, and there are some small holes in it, like roughly 200 thou, and the part has 5 different holes of varying sizes, and I'm drilling these small holes. And the first part that I drilled them on, I thought the part moved in the vise. So when I went to chamfer the holes, the chamfers were off. So I was like, okay, whatever. It moved in the vise. Of course, they're going to be off. So then I put serrated jaws in, and I drilled them again, and the chamfers were still off. So I thought, well, maybe I'm pushing the drill too hard. So I backed off on the drill. This is quite a small drill. Like there's no way this drill is deflecting the part or pushing it or moving it in the vise. So I I went easier on the drill, and they were still off. The holes are still normal to the starting face. So I know the drill's not walking, because if it was walking, it would just snap, because carbide drill, especially split point 140 degree. I thought it was probably not the holder, because it was a brand new holder and a brand new drill. So I tried a new drill, or anyway, I tried a new drill and a brand new holder. No dice that time. So I tried drilling from the other side, and that didn't work. So then I tried spot drilling, even though you shouldn't need to with carbide drill, especially like 5 times diameter, and that didn't do anything. So then I tried immediately following that drill up with like a spot chamfer tool, and that still didn't work, even though you look at the code and the XY position of the drill holes and the chamfers, or the spot chamfer, was literally the same. They were still like different. And at that point, I was just at a loss for words, because every single hole of that size on every single part was off by a different amount in a different direction. So pretty much had no idea what was going on. So then I thought maybe I'll drill the holes before I rough the part out in case it's deflecting. So I did that, and that didn't work. I tried drilling from the other side before roughing out, and that didn't work. I tried drilling the hole at the very end and then immediately chamfering after the whole part had been machined, and that still didn't work. So I tried messing with the datum comp settings. I tried that. That didn't work. I tried pecking. No luck. Tried different pecks. That didn't work. So then I figured I would just make a big test block, and I'm holding it in my hand right now. It's like 5 inches by 4 by 5 probably. And I drilled about 200 holes with 2 different drills and 2 different holders. And wouldn't you know it, every single hole and every single chamfer with both drills is perfect. So then I was like, man, what the hell? Like, what is going on here? And so I figured, well, then I'll go back to running parts, because maybe the issue has fixed itself. And sure enough, it goes back to being messed up. And you measure
So
the holes.
how far off is the chamfer from the hole?
Some of them are like 50 thou off.
Oh, holy shit. Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's like it's
significant.
Yeah.
Are the holes in location? Like if you go inspect them, are they where they're supposed to be? Or is it which one is off?
So the chamfers are correct. The holes are off.
Interesting.
Yep. But the holes are not walking. Like if you measure with a height gauge the center of each hole of the hole on each side of the part, it's not walking. It's just straight up out of position. But every other hole on the part is fine.
How are you selecting the holes in, I'm assuming it's NX? Like is it by face point, or is it by like cylindrical body?
There's actually 2 drilling tool paths in NX. There's hole making and there's drilling, but in either one you literally just select the hole.
Okay. Because all I'm thinking is maybe it's like a modeling issue. You could try interpolating the first like couple hundred thou of the hole with like an 1/8 inch end mill or something, and then seeing if the chamfer lines up.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what Alex suggested. He suggested milling it, but it would. Oh yeah, I guess you're just suggesting like a spot face.
I would go
Pretty
like
much.
Just a few hundred thou, like 200-300 thou with an 1/8 inch, just to see if it. I mean, if that works and it chamfers, you know that there's something awkward in the hole itself. Like the whole selection tool path is clearly either grabbing the. This sounds like it's a 5-axis part.
Yeah.
So yeah, it sounds like maybe it's selecting the wrong angle or the wrong hole location actually, and that maybe there's some weird anomaly in the modeled feature itself.
Yeah. It's totally bizarre. That's what I've been researching. I've brought it up to a bunch of people, and nobody can figure it out. Nobody's had the problem before. Everybody is totally as perplexed as I am. And I asked a couple people on Instagram, very cautiously, being careful not to share too many details, and nobody can seem to figure it out. It just makes no sense.
Can you, instead of selecting the hole, select like the edge of the top of the hole?
Yeah, I tried that too.
And it was still off?
Yep.
Oh, that's bizarre.
Yeah.
And the code looks like normal drilling code. There's no weird TCPC applied or, any kind of weird codes before or after it.
Nope. It's just a G81 drilling cycle.
That's bizarre. I hate stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I hated it at first because it was pissing me off. And then it's just kind of became funny at a point. You can't get mad at it for too long because, it's just interesting. You just want to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, Ethan, thank you so much for joining me. It was really cool to get to hear your story. And like, I talk to a lot of people who have a lot more years of experience than you, and very rarely have I talked to someone 21 that has the breadth of knowledge and of parts that you do. And so it's really cool to see the next generation. I guess it's weird. Like I'm 30, and it's just weird thinking that like there are people 10 years younger than me doing parts that like are jaw dropping, and so it's really cool to see.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's nice. Like you can be confident in yourself, but when you start to doubt yourself, hearing it from other people means a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and
Yep.
there's I feel as machinists we have to have somewhat of a level of self-importance and
Yep.
bravado, because you're running machines that you couldn't afford for years. It's like I'm running a Ferrari's worth of a machine today, and I have to be right 100% of the time, otherwise bad things can go wrong.
Yep.
So I think we all have that like outward confidence, inward like I hope I'm doing things right, and it's always nice to hear that for sure.
Yeah. Until you break a tap or do something stupid,
Yeah, well,
but
this
happens to the best of us.
yeah, this trade will always humble you, no matter how good you think you are. That's right when something bad's gonna happen, or
Yep.
you're gonna drill holes that are 50 thou off or something.
Yep. Yeah. I'll share one more story before we take off. We get a bunch of tools, a bunch of carbide burrs from Monster Tool. And I bet people listening already know where this is going, but you can't recycle those, and you can't recycle them for normal carbide prices, and they're useless to us. So what I would do is heat them up with a blowtorch to melt the brazing, and then just pull the carbide off and recycle that. And one day in the shop, I was heating them up, and there was one burr that was particularly stuck, one carbide burr. So I just gently tapped it with a hammer, and it knocked off, kind of rolled on the floor a bit, bounced, and like just barely hit the glass door on the on the entrance to the shop,
Oh
and
no.
and just instantly spiderwebbed it, just totally shattered it. And that was probably one of my most humbling experiences. Speaking of humbling, so yeah,
Yeah, I think we
yep,
all have done stupid things. Like speaking of dumb things, I think it was maybe last year sometime I broke the probe tip in the S700, but not by crashing it. I was hammering a part down and had been
hmm
inside the machine, and on a backstroke of the hammer clipped the tip of the probe, and it came back and smacked me in the face and then went down to the tray, and I was like, what the hell was that? And I didn't realize what it was at first, and then I saw it just kind of rolling down the chip chute. I was like, you are such an idiot. And of course,
yeah,
as luck would be, I did not have an extra probe tip.
yep,
Thankfully, Brad Southard is local, and I was talking to him about it. He's like, "Oh, well, I've got a spare 6 millimeter one that I don't really use. Like, if you guys want to come by and grab it, you're more than welcome
hmm
to it." It's like, "Oh, thank God."
yeah,
Um,
lifesaver.
yeah. Oh, yeah. But yeah, I think we all do stupid stuff, but you learn from it.
Yep,
Great.
yeah. Well, I really appreciate you having me on. I've always wanted to come on. I've been listening since day one,
Yeah,
every
I'm
single
really glad we can
episode.
make this work. I know we
Yeah,
had talked about it for a long time, and it took me a long time to figure it out. But thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks for all the Patreon listeners who make episodes like this possible, so I can send headsets to people like Ethan, and so you guys have some decent audio. And thanks everyone for listening. I'll be back next week.